What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today is the day. As of the time I'm recording this video, it's the 1st of January 2025, so Happy New Year to all of you. And what better way to celebrate the ushering in of a new year than me taking one last look on the previous year of films that we received, both the good and the bad. Now, I didn't see quite as many movies this year as I did last year, for obvious reasons, but there wasn't anything particularly awful this year. However, there wasn't anything that I found to be groundbreakingly good, at least not as fantastic as films from the previous 2 years, such as Oppenheimer, Across the Spider-Verse, or Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which I would consider some of the best films made in the last decade, if not of all time. Nothing this year reached that level. However, there was also nothing quite as atrociously bad as Morbius or The Atom Project. So, without further ado, let's get into this list with the worst movie I watched in 2024. Coming in at number 19, the bottom of my list, is Harold and the Purple Crayon, a movie that I hadn't even heard of and wasn't going to watch until around a month ago when I made a deal with the devil, aka my friend Lucas, that if I watched this, he would finally watch Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. So I watched this movie on New Year's Eve. What a way to end 2024, am I right? With that said, this movie wasn't nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be, perhaps just because my expectations were so incredibly low. But I found some moments to be unironically funny, but most of it is just absolute absurdity, and I can't tell if the film was deliberately trying to be ironically hilarious, or if it wanted to be taken seriously. It preaches messages of creativity, and the characters commend Harold for being such a free spirit, yet all he does throughout the entire film is destroy the life of Zooey Deschanel's character. However, the villain here was amazing. The most out-of-left-field twist ever occurs in the third act, leading to an epic showdown. You just have to see it for yourself, because describing it here will not do it justice. This movie is something, that's for sure. I watched it, and it's definitely the worst movie that I saw in 2024. Moving on to number 18, I have Kung Fu Panda 4. Now, to be clear, there's a considerable leap in quality from the previous film to this one. I wouldn't call this movie objectively bad. I actually enjoyed watching it, but it's completely disposable and lacking in every way when compared to the previous 3 films in this franchise. It's occasionally funny and not without a valuable message. It isn't teaching bad moral lessons to children or anything like that, but it's nothing that hasn't already been covered in this series, or that we haven't already seen in countless generic animated films. Which sucks, because I would say the first 2 Kung Fu Panda movies are some of my favorite animated films ever made. But the third film, and this one in particular, are so forgettable. I don't remember anything about them. 3 had some solid elements, but this one lacks so much of the charm that those films had, and for that reason it receives this spot on my list. At number 17, I have Scoop. Now, if you didn't know, this is a biopic about the group of journalists who conducted the famous 2019 interview with Prince Andrew, which exposed him for his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and his sexually predatory behavior. When the movie is focused on that, it's really good. It's incredibly satisfying to see this idiotic, entitled rich boy get put on blast in front of the entire world. But it sure as hell feels like it takes a while to get there, because I couldn't really get invested in the lives of these really boring journalist people. I'm not a journalist, however, my parents are, hence the reason why they watched this, and I think they got more out of it than me. But I'm not a journalist, so I didn't get a lot out of this movie. It was a pretty generic biopic. It's serviceable. Everything about it is competent, from the production to the performances. Even the score I thought was pretty decent, but there's nothing that stands out about it, and that's why it ended up being so low on my list. Coming in at number 16 is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Now, I've really been looking forward to talking about this one, because I've seen it twice now. I just recently watched it a second time after rewatching the previous trilogy of the Apes. And I think this movie is a fascinating case study in how to have an incredible setup and not do enough with it. Where I think this film succeeds is continuing on from where the previous trilogy left off thematically without feeling like it's retreading familiar ground. When I first heard about this film, I assumed that it was obviously going to be about Caesar's young son who was left alive at the end of War for the Planet of the Apes. However, that is not the case. We've got one prologue scene of Caesar's funeral, and after that, we jump hundreds of years into the future with an entirely new cast of characters. That's a potentially risky move, and I respect them for that. I like what the movie has to say about false prophets and how the legacy of someone as influential as Caesar can gradually be twisted over time into something corrupt, which is used to enslave the oppressed rather than liberate them, which is what Caesar desired to do. Where the movie falls short is the cast consists of largely flat and uninteresting characters, aside from the wizened old mentor orangutan or Kevin Durand as the villain Proximus Caesar, both of whom seemingly meet their demise by the end of the film. The two main leads, Noah and May, this human and ape duo, are an interesting concept, but not enough is done with them. Noah has the rough outline of a character arc, which is only held together by a few moments focused on him throughout the film, leading to a pretty weak payoff during the third act. Or May, who I just don't really understand as a character. I can't tell if they want me to read her as an ape sympathizer whose motivations are simply forced to change over the course of the story, or if she's simply a sociopathic survivalist who will do whatever she can to preserve the human race. What she does at the end completely recontextualizes all of her actions throughout the film. As a beginning to a new trilogy, this could have been better, but when I reflected on the previous films, Rise of the Planet of the Apes wasn't that great either, and this is already better than that. So I'm cautiously optimistic for the future of this new Ape series. And at number 15, I've got Beetlejuice. I've already talked about this in one of my previous videos, so I won't spend a ton of time on it here because I don't have that much to say about it. It's a nice return to some classic Tim Burton fun. It's around the same level of its predecessor, and it's messy from a narrative point of view, but that's not what it's about. As much as I hate to say this because of how overused this phrase has become, it's a turn your brain off movie. If you try to question the logic of the world or what's going on, it falls apart, but it's all about the ride. It's a roller coaster of a movie, another saying that I absolutely despise, but it's applicable to this film. Moving on to number 14, I have The Fall Guy. Another one that I haven't talked about, but that I also don't have that much to say about either. It has some fun commentary on the industry with decent performances and, for once, some actual good fourth wall breaking humor. It's definitely cheesy and lacking in anything particularly meaningful or substantive when it came to its themes or messaging. All around, it's a good time and competently made, especially with the star power brought on by Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, who are both excellent actors. I'm honestly just struggling to find ways to drag out this segment because this movie isn't that memorable, but I enjoyed watching it, and that seems to be a sentiment shared by most people who've watched the film. At number 13 is Music by John Williams. This was a documentary released on Disney Plus at the beginning of November, and I liked it a lot. It's considerably more in-depth than most documentaries of this type. And it's one thing to revere Williams as this larger-than-life legend in the music world, but it's another thing entirely to see his humble beginnings, what led him to creating music, and how he became this incredible composer that we all know and love today. Now, I did find it to be a little bit unfocused occasionally, with weird points where it would divert the focus to someone like J.J. Abrams, who does little more than nerd out over Williams' work, because let's face it, the man hasn't created a single original thing in his entire life. But other than that, this was a solid, comprehensive look at the life of one of the greatest composers of all time. At number 12, I have Piece by Piece, quite possibly the most bizarrely creative and abstract film of the entire year. The story of Pharrell Williams being told in Lego form allowed for some incredibly colorful and expressive sequences which would not be possible in a typical documentary. It manages that while not being entirely devoid of substance, because most of this is played straight and not for laughs. But I'm still kind of confused on how I feel about this movie. Its very existence confuses me, but I have a weird level of respect for Pharrell for being willing to go all out with this strange project, which he must have known would result in little financial success or response from the general movie-going audience outside of the weirdos like me and my friends who were curious what the hell this Lego biopic thing was. Coming in at number 11 is Twisters, one of the most pleasantly surprising movies of the entire year for me. I went into it expecting dumb garbage just like the original film, and I ended up getting a lot more than that. The character work was good. It had solid messaging on top of the goofy tornado action that you'd expect. I'd compare it to last year's Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. Obviously, I prefer that film, but they're comparable in the sense that they both deliver on what they promise while giving you that little bit more to make it a truly memorable experience. Please, Hollywood, if you're gonna continue to make silly blockbusters, make them like this. Bringing us into the top 10 is Blitz. This was a solid as hell war drama with excellent performances from who are largely unknown actors, aside from Saoirse Ronan, who, let's admit, never disappoints. On a surface level, this seems no different than a lot of other war films, but what I think makes this one unique is that it captures the desperation and horror of the time from the perspective of a child, which I haven't really seen done effectively in any film outside of Empire of the Sun, meaning this is the first time a movie has done that well in over 30 years. That's commendable, in my opinion, and it made for one of the most visceral movie-watching experiences I've had since, I want to say, 1917. But moving on to number 9, I have Memoir of a Snail, another one that my friend Lucas recommended I watch, And thanks for this one, man, because this movie demolished me emotionally. This is such a darkly realistic little story told in a cute and humorous way through some beautiful stop motion animation. But it's not without hope or positivity, despite the darkness that overwhelms our protagonists. It has an edginess to it, which I found simultaneously off-putting and charming. It's all tied up with a beautiful bow at the end, a silver lining for our main character. I couldn't have asked for much better. I just probably won't be revisiting this frequently in future due to how oppressively sad it is. At number 8, I have Suncoast. Now, a lot of you probably know my friend Ian from some of my live streams and one or two of my videos that he contributed to. He recommended this movie to me, and I'm glad he did because I probably wouldn't have heard of it otherwise. It's gone under the radar for a lot of people, but I found it to be surprisingly touching. With its exploration of complicated moral questions and themes that are core to the human condition, all while retaining the spirit of a coming-of-age story for this young protagonist, wherein it is able to forego a lot of the tropes of those types of films. For example, the main character's friends turning on her after some bullshit manufactured conflict. This movie doesn't go that route, which I'm really happy about. Nico Parker, who I've never seen in anything else, proves that she is a strong up-and-coming movie star with a fantastic performance here. Her chemistry with her mother, played by Laura Linney, as well as Woody Harrelson's character, was so palpable I almost forgot I was watching a movie at points. Until those damn song choices pulled me out. Look, I love licensed music as much as the next guy, but I really did not need a pop song telling me how to feel during the scene where the main character's brother is dying. Please, for the love of God, let these scenes breathe without music instead of shoving some stupid song down my throat. Otherwise, this movie probably would have been a lot higher on the list, but that one thing drags it down. At the number 7 spot, I have Look Back, and I will preface this, as I always do, with the fact that I haven't consumed much anime throughout my life. But I still thought this was an incredibly powerful story brought to life through a beautifully rendered art style that differs from that of any other anime that I've seen, with how fluid and real the movements felt. The tale of these two artists forming a connection and pursuing their shared passion, exploring both the positive impact and cost of doing that. Keep in mind, the film accomplishes all of this in 58 minutes. That's under an hour. I felt more emotionally invested in this hour-long short film, essentially, than I was in most of the hours of television that I watched in 2024. How sad is that for the entertainment industry? If this were an objective list and not my subjective ranking, this film would be way higher on the list. It would probably be number 1. But this is my personal list, and there were 6 more films that I enjoyed watching more than it. Speaking of which, at number 6, I have Wicked, and I will fully admit right away that I'm probably biased towards this movie because of the incredible experience I had watching it in theaters with my musical theater friends. I talked to my friend Ian about the movie after he saw it, alone, in theaters, and he didn't like it nearly as much as I did, because he didn't have the same experience. I can fully understand why certain aspects of this movie would be a turnoff for certain people, especially if they aren't big musical fans, like I wasn't earlier this year, One of my common issues with musicals is the tonal whiplash that comes about as a result of the happy-go-lucky music mixed with self-serious drama. But in this film's case, I see it as a service to the story rather than a detriment to it, because it's already taking place in this wacky world of Oz, with talking animals, made-up words, and crazy colorful costumes. So when people like Ariana Grande, for example, are giving eccentric performances, it fits perfectly within the context of this story and the world that it inhabits. Now, I know some people have an issue with the fact that they're splitting this musical adaptation into two parts. How much staying power will it really have? Can it remain relevant for that long? I've seen some people saying that this is an MCU-ification of Wicked, and I don't know what to say, man. I am pretty hard on a lot of Marvel movies, and I loved this, so I think those people don't know what they're talking about. I've still been listening back and singing to the songs almost 2 months after this film came out, so I think that's more than enough of an indicator that this film has and will continue to have relevance in the future. Coming in at number 5, I have The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. Now, the aggressive backlash this film has received is pretty unwarranted, if you ask me. I've seen idiots all over the internet like this guy bashing it without even watching it to form their own opinion, which is, quite frankly, cowardly and pathetic. Based purely on its own merits, I think this film was really well done. A return to Middle-earth in a different medium, a completely new story, which still feels congruent with the 6 films directed by Peter Jackson. It just worked for me. Now, there will always be the guys who whine about it being woke because they can't stand seeing a woman in a position of power or who is a skilled warrior, even if it's logical and makes sense in the context of the story. Does this film hold a candle to the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, or even The Hobbit? No, but it doesn't need to. It was a nice treat for me as a Lord of the Rings fan. A dessert to the main course, if you will, and certainly far better than the moldy bread we were given in the form of Rings of Power Season 2. At number 4 on my list is a complete unknown. Yes, the Bob Dylan biopic that released just recently, and this film shocked me by how fantastic it was, because I'd hardly heard about it. My sister wanted to go see it, so I went with her and my dad to watch it on Boxing Day last week, and it blew me away. Timothée Chalamet disappears into this role, which I was not expecting from him. It was nice to see Elle Fanning again, because I don't think I've seen her in anything since, like, Maleficent 2. She killed it as Dylan's girlfriend in the film. I liked how it touched on the passing of the baton when it comes to musicians in the industry, with Dylan essentially taking over from Woody Guthrie as the most prominent musician of the time, and him innovating the style and genre of music. Just fascinating stuff for me as a music student. It also walks a fine line by showing Dylan as a sympathetic protagonist, yet also conveying the fact that he was kind of an odious sociopath. I think they were able to get that across quite effectively in this film. I would highly recommend you guys check this film out if you get the chance, because it surpassed any expectations I may have had, and it's undoubtedly one of my favorites of the year. Kicking off my top 3 is The Wild Robot. And what do I need to say that a million other people haven't already said? It's a return to form for DreamWorks. A lovely human story about animals and a robot trying to raise a goose. What a random concept, based on a book obviously, that succeeds at being an incredibly powerful story, grounded in reality despite its goofiness and being set in a somewhat futuristic world. A fantastic voice cast, beautiful score. It delivers on every front. I can't really add anything new to the discussion. It's just a great film, and obviously one of my favorites of 2024. But coming in at number 2, my second favorite film of 2024 was originally going to be The Wild Robot. I went back and forth on that, but I ultimately decided on Inside Out 2, purely because of anxiety. This film struck a personal chord with me that I was not expecting. I like the first Inside Out quite a bit, but I loved this movie. The humor, how many deep-cut references there are in it to not only classic animation tropes, but even the music industry, Riley's struggle to fit in with her peers, the new emotions that were introduced, just everything I could have wanted from a sequel to the original film. It improves on it in almost every conceivable way, and tells a wonderful story as Pixar usually manages to do. Definitely one of their best sequels in a while, and I hope they continue this series with films of the same quality as this one. But finally, at number 1, not only the best movie I saw this year, but the one that I had the greatest experience watching both times that I've seen it, Dune Part 2. I mean, is it that surprising? I've already said most of what I want to say about this film, but it's endlessly impressive to me that a film of this scale and complexity can be released today, not only receive critical acclaim, but also be financially successful and be deserving of both of those things, because this film is extremely well done. Denis Villeneuve's direction is virtually flawless. Hans Zimmer's score is next level as always. The performances are excellent. Timothée Chalamet was in 2 of my favorite movies of the year. If you'd have told me that at the beginning of 2024, I wouldn't have believed you, but here we are. It's an epic, the scale of which we haven't seen since, I want to say, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, I may personally prefer the first film because it's more sound as a narrative. That film was mostly centered around world building, while this one is focused on spectacle. And when films are centered on spectacle, they tend to sacrifice some of the coherency of their story. So there were a few plot issues in here that weren't present in the previous film, but that's hardly an issue. It's so minimal compared to how well done everything else is. So, that's why Dune Part 2 is my favorite movie of 2024. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this ranking of all the new movies I watched in 2024. As I said at the beginning of the video, I didn't get around to seeing a lot of new movies this year, but I saw most of the ones I wanted to, and on that front, I wasn't disappointed by a ton of them. I actually found there to be more disappointments on the TV front this year. I don't think this will go down as the greatest year for film ever or anything, especially compared to the previous 2 exceptional years for films that we had in 2022 and 2023. But there were a lot of pleasant surprises this year. The ones that stand out to me, at least, are definitely Wicked, Twisters, and A Complete Unknown, but if you guys have any of your own that you'd like to share, feel free. Did you agree with my list? Did you disagree with any of my placements? Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day, and a happy new year. Take care.